Nobody offered a home to the destitute woman and her 2 sons until the cowboy said, "I have 2 children now. We're 6." The woman and her boys arrived right after the sun came up. Their steps were slow and unsure as they walked onto the dirty main road of the border town. She held one child by the hand and carried the little one on her hip. The 3 of them moved quietly, like shadows, trying not to bother anyone. The people in the town stopped walking to look at her. Their faces showed a mix of distrust and unease. It was as if the simple act of a destitute woman walking into their world had upset the ground beneath their feet. She kept her head down, not because she was ashamed, but to protect her children from the cold looks she was already used to. As they walked past the main shop, she whispered to her older boy to stay near. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was beating fast and unevenly. She had come here because she heard tales of new chances, of places where a person could start over. But every door she went to brought a new sadness. The hotel owner shook his head before she even spoke. The lady at the rooming house closed her curtains as soon as she saw the woman coming. The people standing outside the saloon turned their backs to avoid looking her in the eye. She had gone through much worse in the past. The pain of losing her own house, the hurt of carrying deep sadness without showing it for the sake of her sons. Yet something about the polite meanness of this town hurt more than open anger ever had. It reminded her that people could ignore a person's humanity without even raising their voices. She moved to the edge of the street and sat with her children on the dirt, mostly to rest their small legs rather than to ask for pity. Even though she could feel the heavy stares from across the wooden porches, her boys were quiet. They didn't fully understand the rejection, but they felt the tightness in her arms. She held them closer, and the older one asked if they should keep walking, asking if there might be another town where someone would let them stay. She wanted to say yes, to give him hope right away, but her tiredness stole the words before she could speak. Instead, she smoothed his hair and told him they would be okay because they had made it through everything else together. As the day went on and the heat rose from the dusty ground, more people walked by and looked at them with the same mix of curiosity and coldness. Though no one said it out loud, the meaning hung in the quiet air. She was not welcome, her children were not welcome, and the town would not care about their needs. She looked around at the shops, at the horses tied to the rails, and at the people whose lives seemed neatly organized with no room for someone like her. She wondered if she had made a mistake coming here. She wondered if she should gather her energy and keep walking until her legs could no longer move. The younger child pulled at her shirt, asking softly, when would they find a place to sleep? She swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing calm into her voice as she said, "Soon," even though she had no idea where that might be. It was at that exact time that she saw a man walking from the far end of the street. He was not rushing, but walking with a steady, sure pace, as if he had already made a choice before taking his first step. He wore a wide hat, a vest that looked old from work, and a tool belt at his side that showed experience rather than danger. He carried himself like someone used to spotting trouble and deciding quickly who needed aid. The townspeople watched him, too. Some raised their eyebrows, curious to know if he would also pretend not to see her, or if he would make the same rude motions she had seen all morning. But the cowboy kept walking until he reached her and her children, then paused just a few feet away, his shadow falling lightly over them. The woman looked up, not with anger, but with a tired watchfulness, ready for whatever he might say. Yet he took off his hat with a calm kindness that made her blink in surprise. He bent down slightly so he would not tower over the children and reached out his hand. It was not a demand, but more like an offer, a motion that held no judgment or doubt. The woman did not move at first, unsure if this was another moment that would turn into sadness. But his voice was steady when he finally spoke, telling her that she did not need to keep wandering and that no one should have to raise children without a place to rest. She looked at his face closely, searching for the harshness she had seen in others, but his eyes held a surprise and warmth, the kind that was rare in these towns, and even rarer toward people like her. The older boy leaned a little toward him, feeling something safe, and the younger one moved closer to his mother, waiting for her to choose. The cowboy looked at all three of them before saying that if no one here had space for him, then they could make space together. He explained that he had 2 kids of his own, and they had learned that family didn't have to start at birth. His words were not loud or showy, but they carried a meaning that settled in the air around them. It was the kind of statement that changed the path of a life without needing to be said twice. The woman let out a breath slowly, not in relief, but in careful wonder, as if testing whether the world would let her accept kindness after so many people turned her away. She asked why he would do this for strangers. He answered simply that no one who carried the love she clearly had for her children should be left alone to survive the world. The street had gone quiet behind them. The townspeople stood at a distance, unsure whether to be surprised or upset, but the cowboy didn't seem to notice them as he waited patiently for her answer. She finally nodded, placing her hand in his open one. She felt the rough skin of a man who had worked through hard times and still kept room in his heart for others. Her boys looked up at him with eyes that held a careful spark of something they had not felt in a long time: hope. And as the cowboy helped them to their feet, her life shifted in a way she had never guessed, not because someone saved her, but because someone saw her as a person worth standing beside. The walk to the cowboy's land felt dreamlike to the woman, as if she had stepped out of a life full of doubt into one she had not yet learned to trust. But the steady presence of the cowboy walking beside her made each step feel less like a risk and more like a path with a purpose. Her children stayed close, looking up at him now and then, surprised that he spoke to them gently, asking their names and listening with the quiet patience of a man who never rushed anyone. When they reached the small ranch a few miles outside town, she saw 2 horses near the fence and a simple wooden house with smoke rising softly from the chimney. Before she could wonder if his own children might be scared or angry about newcomers, the door opened. 2 young children ran out, greeting their father with happy habit. They stopped when they noticed the woman and her sons, their curious looks turning cautious. But the cowboy rested a hand on each of their shoulders and explained in a simple, calm tone that their family had grown today. He said that kindness was the only thing worth holding on to in a world that tested people too often. The children nodded after thinking for a moment, accepting the idea more easily than adults ever could, and they moved aside to let the new people enter. Inside, the woman felt overcome by the warmth. She saw things she had not known for so long: chairs worn by use, blankets folded neatly, and shelves with small special items that only real homes have. She had almost forgotten how it felt to step into a place where people belonged to one another, not just by blood, but by choice. As the days passed, she found herself learning the flow of the ranch. She helped with chores and cooked meals alongside the cowboy's children. She watched her own sons slowly relax their shoulders as they began to laugh again, their voices brightening corners of the house that had stayed quiet for a long time. The cowboy never treated her as a guest or a load to carry. He made choices with her, not for her. And when they worked side by side fixing the fence or caring for the horses, she saw the quiet strength behind his first offer. She saw the understanding that kindness was not weakness, but a choice that needed bravery from anyone who used it. The townspeople heard of the living situation soon enough. Their views were split between dislike and unwilling respect, but none dared to challenge him openly. He lived by rules that even his critics knew better than to question. The woman expected the weight of judgment to crush her spirit as it had in other places. Yet something different happened. She no longer feared their looks because she finally had something stronger than acceptance. She had safety, pride, and a future shaped by shared effort rather than charity. One afternoon, while she was fixing a tear in her younger son's shirt, the cowboy approached her with the same calm honesty he had shown the day they met, but this time there was a hint of doubt in his voice as he said he hoped she didn't feel forced to stay if she ever wished to leave. She looked at him, shocked by the thought, because she had not once thought about leaving since the moment her children stepped through his door. She told him that people like her learned to read truth in actions, not promises. She said that every kindness he had shown her children was proof enough that she wanted this place to be their home. The cowboy nodded. his face softening with relief. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the safety that had grown quietly between them. As the months went on, the 6 of them became a family, shaped not by ease, but by shared strength. Each person filled spaces in the other's lives that they didn't know were empty. The older children bonded over chores. The younger ones shared games in the dirt outside the barn. Evenings ended with stories told around the small fire, with laughter rising from a house that had once been broken in different ways. The woman often thought back to the moment she sat in the dust of that town, believing her future had shrunk to a tiny thread. She understood now that sometimes the world tested a person not to break them, but to lead them toward a place where they were meant to be seen. One night, as she stepped outside to breathe in the quiet air and look at the land stretching far beyond the ranch, the cowboy joined her, standing beside her without speaking. He didn't need to speak. Their silence held the truth of everything they had survived and everything they had chosen together. When she looked at their children sleeping safely inside, their small bodies relaxed for the first time in years, she realized that the life she thought she had lost had been rebuilt. It was built from the strength of one man's choice to welcome them. And though the world beyond the ranch still had its barriers and judgments, the story of the woman who had arrived with 2 children and left with a family of 6 was one she carried proudly. For it was not a tale of rescue, but of 2 broken paths joining into something whole, something strong, something finally called home.